Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thanks for joining us for this webinar. My name's Ant. I work for a company called Spectro Cloud, and I'm joined by a couple of esteemed guests today for this webinar, Mastering Enterprise Kubernetes Real-World Strategies. This is going to be a fast and furious, hopefully frank discussion of war stories. I'm joined by two people who have been in the wars, I think it's fair to say, and have seen the reality of enterprise adoption in the field firsthand. I've got Pedro here, our man in the field in the EMEA region here at Spectro Cloud. He's based in the UK. He's Portuguese. He's a love machine. He is one of our senior solutions architects, and he has some real tales to tell from all kinds of industries, and you've probably seen him speak at KubeCon a couple of times. We've got Scott Rosenberg, who from our partner TeraSky. He is a lead architect, and I've spent some time with Scott over the last couple of days. He has some very strong opinions, and you've probably seen him speak too. So I'm going to hand over to Pedro after I tell you what we're going to talk about today. We're going to have a little bit of a whistle-stop tour of what we think the state of enterprise Kubernetes adoption is today. And then we're going to talk through the 4 key capabilities that we think you need to manage in this situation. We're going to finish with just a few next steps for you, and then hopefully there'll be some time for questions. We're targeted for 45 minutes, and I've used up a little over 1.5. Pedro, over to you for the current state of enterprise adoption.
Thank you, Ant. I'm glad I put on my new teal shirt that we have going on, and Scott, we need to get you one of those. Yeah, Ant, you still have the old school ones. But no, thank you. I think for the current state of enterprise adoption for Kubernetes, I think for the past years, one of the things that we've seen, and Scott, me and you have been talking about this for quite a while, is that every single customer and enterprise that we talk to, they seem to think that they're all different. And to a certain extent, they all are, of course. But what we are seeing is that 90% of the problems that most of the enterprise customers that we talk to are very much the same. So even though everyone thinks that they're alone into this journey and they have their own set of problems, of course they do have their own problems, but most of these are also shared by other people. And we're seeing a lot of these around, for sure, scalability. So we've seen that as the adoption of Kubernetes keeps growing, that's one of the biggest problems as well around scalability, and how do you manage all of those different clusters across all of those different clouds as well, right? One of the other ones that we'll be talking to in this podcast together with Scott, one of the other drivers is now the AI craze that everyone is tending to jump to, and to a certain extent, Kubernetes has been the de facto standard, in my opinion, as an orchestrator for those workloads for multiple different reasons, which we'll discuss later. But 100% Kubernetes is at the forefront when it comes to AI, and that's also driving a lot of the complexity, as you would expect, and of course, driving some of that adoption too. So with that said, we've been doing this for a while, and when I say we, definitely Ant has been driving a lot of this. So our State of Kubernetes report has been running for a few years, as you can see, and we've seen some changes. Some of them have been
just one small thing there. It's the state of production Kubernetes. And I think that that's extremely important, because there is the state of Kubernetes report that also comes out, but the state of Kubernetes report also deals with non-production, small.
I love you, Scott. Thank you so much for calling that out.
And I think it's really important, because in the state of Kubernetes, edge or AI is going to be way lower than it is in state of production Kubernetes.
Absolutely.
But it's important to look at the production Kubernetes, even if you're not there today, to understand where you're going to go to. So even if you aren't in production today, look at where you're going to need to be in a year or 2 years, 3 years, so that you can start planning and building your way up to where the industry is saying de facto that you have to be in order to productionalize.
Exactly. And that's a really important call out. We consciously structured the research that we've done. And for those of you who find this interesting, I have a webinar next week on the same topic, where we were only interviewing. Yeah, shameless plug. We only surveyed organizations with more than 250 employees. So it's, depending on your definition of enterprise, we're not talking about SMBs here, and we're only asking those that are using Kubernetes in production. So this is not home labbers, it's not students, it's not those who have never got past the lab. This is what happens when Kubernetes meets the real world. So these, exactly as you said, Scott, these are the challenges that you face when you get past those early days. This is learning from those who've been down the path before you.
Yeah, and I'm on the naughty list now, and I'm sorry. No, I think, yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things is that all of these 4 ones that we have on the screen are all very much intertwined, right? It's very interesting to see that obviously skills and headcount has been constant. So that problem is still there, has been there, it hasn't really changed. But it's also very interesting to see that the multi-environment is coming up, because obviously with the adoption coming up, people want to use this in multiple different environments, which is increasing the complexity of it, of course. And the only thing that we've seen as of last year is that security is coming down. But I think, and Scott, back me up here, I think that's because we're getting better. And the tools and integrations that we're using for security within the ecosystem are becoming better at doing what they're supposed to do. So I think that's why we're seeing a bit of a decrease there.
Exactly. I think we're seeing it in cost at a lower level, but we're seeing it in cost and security. And I think the reason is that there are different tools in the market today. Already the security space has some really good tools to it. Does that mean that we have solved the security issues of Kubernetes? Absolutely not. We can see that for 40% of people, it's the top challenge, right? So it is a major challenge still today, but there are already tools that help us combat that challenge. Cost, there are some amazing tools in that space as well. For multi-environment consistency, that's the biggest challenge. And it's what I always say, Kubernetes was meant to be cloud agnostic, and 95% of it is. But the 5% that isn't, you always need. So it's not like a typical 5% of a product, maybe you use it, you don't. That 5% that is cloud specific, every single person needs. So you will never have completely agnostic clouds. Be it the small things like AWS returning an FQDN for a service type load balancer, or Google Azure, or like on-prem solutions returning IP address, which is returned in a different field. And it's different. And the way you integrate with this is going to be different, or which storage I use, or which networking I use. All these things change between the clouds, and that's what makes these things challenging. And we're seeing more and more multi-cloud, being a reality. In almost all organizations.
So let's jump ahead to the requirements for solving these things. Automation.
The favorite word, everyone's favorite word these days, automation.
It is.
No, I think, I think there's a few components on the automation piece that we should address in this podcast. And I think one part is how much a platform that you choose, that it's going to be managing your Kubernetes fleet, can automate tasks for you. So I think that's where we come into the full stack declarative management, and how the platform is doing reconciliation into all these integrations that you're deploying and all the stacks and the infrastructure layers and all that. So that's one component. But then we have also the other component, to Scott's point as well just earlier, which is on the infrastructure as code side of things, and also the nuances that come with that. Because even though Kubernetes is meant to be agnostic, if you're utilizing multiple clouds, then you'll have to also have those nuances within your infrastructure as code strategy, but also within the platform that you're utilizing. So I think, Scott, from your side, I think you've been involved a lot within multiple different automation tools. And I mean, we've worked together, and we'll talk a little bit about that on some of those. But it would be great to, from your perspective, obviously, as you are part of that community within, of course, Crossplane, within Terraform, within Backstage. It would be great to understand from your side what you're seeing within the community, but also how is that translating into the customers that we're both supporting together.
Yeah, I think it's an extremely interesting area, right? Terraform for years has been the leader in the infrastructure as code space, and it's still the most predominant infrastructure as code tool. And we've had all the newcomers, things like Pulumi that comes, and you have the cloud specific ones like, CloudFormation or Azure or ARM templates, right? Or I forgot what Google's one is called, but like everyone has their specifics, but it's really about those cloud agnostic ones. And those are the ones that are really winning the battle. And the real interesting one in my mind, again, as a, Kubernetes, whatever, love Kubernetes, live it, breathe it. Crossplane is, I think, the next new kid on the block that actually has the chance of like taking over this area. And I think the real reason for that is that it is a paradigm shift. It's moving from one-off, create my infrastructure into a consistent reconciliation, bring the benefit of Kubernetes into infra as code. And, one of the customers that we've been working on together, actually, Pedro, it's extremely interesting because one of those customers is a very large financial company. And by them, Terraform is their bread and butter. They do things with Terraform. That's how they manage things. And the great thing when we were doing the project is that everything in Spectro Cloud, when we went to do anything from the configuration of the platform itself to the deployment of the clusters to deployment of things into those clusters, everything end to end fully through Terraform in a simple, reproducible, declarative nature, using reusable modules and everything, making it extremely powerful and extremely easy to bring up a cluster, tear down a cluster, give a cluster as a service like experience with, and that as cluster as a service, that isn't EKSCTL create cluster, which is bare bones and has nothing. This is with 20 plus add-ons in it, integrated with enterprise identity providers and RBAC and everything that you need to actually make this a production ready cluster from day zero with a single Terraform apply. On the other hand, though, we have another customer that me and you have been working closely on. And I've had the privilege of also working with the Spectro team on this Crossplane provider. And the Crossplane provider is really interesting because this customer said they wanted to take it the next step. And they said, yeah, we deploy applications to Kubernetes using GitOps. What if we managed Kubernetes itself via GitOps?
In the same way, yeah.
Exactly. And the entire platform, all of the configuration of Spectro Cloud itself, all of the configuration of the profiles and the clusters and the projects and everything in the platform, 100% defined as Kubernetes manifests in Git in a declarative nature, making it simple and reproducible. And I think both customers are extremely happy with these solutions. And it's really a what fits the use case. There's not one is better than the other. And the benefit is both of them with Spectro, full support end to end of the entire platform's capabilities are there.
Yeah, it's the flexibility. And I think most importantly, and we started to be completely honest, we started looking at Crossplane. We've looked at Crossplane a while ago. And Scott, me and you, we had this conversation many times. We looked at Crossplane a few years ago, but there wasn't much traction because at least the customers that we were talking to and all of that, as you said, it was still early stage. I mean, Crossplane is still the new kid on the block, so it's still early stage. They had a new release that it makes it even more stable now, and that fits the bill for a lot more customers in the way that they want to do it, exactly as you said. But also for us, we started because of the interaction that we have with you and the customer. we started then bringing into, okay, this crossplane is something that we need to start looking into. So our team started working with you. But one of the things that this brings for us as a platform is that we only do Kubernetes and Kubernetes orchestration. But then what Crossplane allows us to, as you're doing with most of the with those customers, and we're doing with those customers as well, is to then also bring in other components into that same fold, so that you're now managing all of these different things with Crossplane in Palette, and it's all done in a declarative full stack manner as part of the cluster. But you're not just managing the cluster itself, you're also managing all of the other components that sit outside of it. And I think that's really the glue that is bringing all of these things together.
And I think that comes down to one of the key elements that I think the industry has started to understand. And Crossplane is the extreme of this. But when Kelsey Hightower back in the day said that Kubernetes is a platform for building platforms, it was never meant to be the platform for our developers directly. It's way too low level, but it's an amazing platform for building platforms. Yeah. And Kubernetes is, in the end, an API server with reconciliation loops. That's what it is, with a very simple database in the back end called etcd. And in the end,
when it doesn't break.
When it doesn't break, it's simple, exactly. Or when that's the actual database being used by the cloud provider in the back end, and it's not being changed out.
We sidetrack.
Exactly. In the end, though, that's what Kubernetes is. Kubernetes is not a system to run containers. Yes, that is one of the capabilities that it has, but it is way more than that. We've been using Cert Manager for years in the industry, everyone almost, to manage certificates in external certificate systems. Service type load balancers, creating load balancers in AWS, Azure, Google, in F5, Avi, whatever it is. Those are external resources that we're creating. Why can't we extend that to be able to create other things? And Spectro Cloud, for example, is built on Cluster API. And the idea of Cluster API, a project that is near and dear to my heart as well, that I've had the privilege of contributing to as well, is that Cluster API says, hey, let's manage Kubernetes using Kubernetes. Crossplane just takes that to the next step and says, manage RDS through Kubernetes. Manage Azure
buckets,
SQL.
Manage whatever you like.
Manage Azure OpenAI from Kubernetes. What do I care? It's a declarative state that goes through a reconciliation loop and tries to make sure that the actual state is as close to desired state as possible. And having that capability is huge.
Yeah. And I think that's, to your point, that's exactly what the industry is coming up to, is how to utilize Kubernetes to its full extent. And I think Crossplane to me is something that really unlocks that power.
And if we look here just on the right side here on this slide, I think this is important. This is some of the data from the State of Production Kubernetes report from 2025. I think that what we're seeing here of like how many clusters are Snowflakes or pets, right? Right.
It's more than half.
The fact that more than half are still treating it that way is actually quite a thing, saying that we still have a huge amount of work to do in the Kubernetes space, because we should not be treating our clusters as pets. And yes, there are challenges, especially with persistent workloads in Kubernetes. And you should be running persistent stateful workloads in Kubernetes because there's huge benefits. It comes with trade-offs, and you have to learn how to balance those. But I think that there's a lot of work. But one of the things that infrastructure as code gives us is it helps in this area. Because if I declaratively have full stack declarative lifecycle management, and I'm managing this through infrastructure as code, as long as everything is declared for me and I didn't do a bunch of one-off kubectl apply Helm installs, if that cluster gets deleted, if I don't have stateful applications in there, it's literally reapply that configuration and my cluster is back and working, right? Again, that's the optimal scenario. You may need to change DNS, things like that. But in general, it's back and working. You're in the same state you were
interchangeable
before.
Clusters, and the whole history of manufacturing, it's interchangeable parts is what made scale happen from guns to cars.
Well, and it's what Kubernetes forces for pods. We just need to use that paradigm for Kubernetes itself.
For clusters. So you guys have spoken a lot in the last few minutes about full stack declarative and recreating the entire cluster. I think this might be a time for us to get onto the next slide where we've got this conceptual model and the importance of optionality on the one side, but also consistency on the other. Who wants to take this?
I'll share just here quickly. One of the things that made me really love Spectro Cloud was actually this. One of the things that we built actually at TeraSky was this idea that we call the Kubernetes adoption framework, which is our framework for how to help people adopt Kubernetes in the companies. And we actually built it in like this layered approach. And our marketing team built this whole, thing of a layered approach with, it looks exactly the same as this. And when I saw this and like all the stuff when I was looking at Spectro, I'm like, okay, we're aligned. We understand. Like we had the same mindset.
We get each other.
And it just connected like immediately. And I think that this top line is so important that I know no one that runs Kubernetes. Well, you can't run Kubernetes without any add-ons, right? It doesn't work because you don't have networking. You have to install some CNI at minimum. You, in 99% of cases, need at least a CSI for storage, right? You're going to need now a CPI, the cloud provider interface, now that that's externalized from core Kubernetes. So we're already at 3 just to get bare bones Kubernetes working. That's without monitoring, logging, tracing, anything else that I need, certificate management, ingress, services of type load balancer, anything that I need in the real world isn't included there. Kubernetes is, I like to think of it like IKEA. It's a bunch of parts, and you have to put it all together, though. And I think that's
without
really
the drawings.
Exactly, right? They threw away the drawings, or they're just not in a language you understand.
Figure it out.
Right. And what we can see around the side is all of these different software packs, like installations that are verified by Spectro Cloud, that we can create this idea of a profile, which is, what does version 132 of Kubernetes mean to my organization? What does monitoring stack mean to my organization? And I can add all these pieces together into a unified profile. And when I create a cluster, say, hey, I want you to have the monitoring profile. I want you to have my persistent workload profile. I want you to have my vSphere infrastructure profile. Or I want you to have my AWS infra profile. And the key of also being able to do multiple profiles is that if something is cloud agnostic, as we mentioned, 90 to 95% of Kubernetes is. So have that in a cloud agnostic profile, be it the same everywhere I am. In the parts that are specific to your infra, create a specific infrastructure profile. And I can piece those together when I build my end clusters, just giving my desired state. I want monitoring. I don't need to care what that means. I want monitoring. My platform team has already said what monitoring means and have defined that profile for me to consume easily, which is extremely powerful.
Yeah, and I think it ties back to those customers that we were discussing. I mean, both of them, but specifically the financial one, where they have multiple environments. And to your point, they need to come up with, okay, I have VMware, I have AWS, EKS, and then I have bare metal on MAS. So I have to come up with all of these validated profiles, which then my teams can then consume. And then they can then have other teams that, to your point, for example, are building the monitoring stack. And then they build what that means to them, which then gets ported across all of these clusters if they wanted to in the same way. So they also have all of this standardization and templatization. Is that a word? I guess.
Yeah, it is now.
across all of these clusters. So yeah, I think this is very powerful, and it goes also back to that automation piece that we were talking about earlier, which is you have the the infrastructure as code on the automation side, but then you have the automation as part of the platform. And with this full cycle or full stack declarative state within Palette and within the packs that Scott you were just referring to, we are providing to a certain extent some level of automation there as well, or at least some level of removing complexity and introducing guardrails, so that when people are deploying these stacks, one, they know they're validated, And two, if they want to, they have things like built-in presets. They have things like cluster profile variables so that you can templatize this and deploy it across multiple environments. So all of these different things that basically remove away the complexity and let the platform do that for you so that you can focus on all the other different things. You can focus on how to fix etcd when it breaks or something like that. Basically, no shade on etcd anymore. I promise.
Yeah, and I will say on that, like, two more things also. Like, one of the amazing things with PAX is one of the things that, there's a close friend of mine, Ricardo Katz, who works on Kubernetes as well, created kubepug back in the day. For those that know it, which is kubectl deprecations or whatever, that basically goes and says, hey, like, you're running these API versions, those are deprecated in the version of Kubernetes you want to move to, you should change that, right? Like, we have this issue where in an API-driven system where you have deprecations of APIs and all of that, there are tools to do that for core Kubernetes. Where that doesn't exist at all in the CNCF landscape, though, is for add-ons. And how do I know what version of Cert Manager can I have in Kubernetes 133, right? Or, hey, this version breaks on that version of Kubernetes. You can't use it. And we have these interoperabilities. And in the enterprise, this becomes extremely difficult to manage at scale. And one of the great things that PACs include within them is that they can say, hey, I support between this version of Kubernetes and this version of Kubernetes, or I need to have this other software installed on the cluster for me to be installed. And then when I go to create a cluster, it's going to say, no, you can't create this cluster because you're deploying X, and it actually depends on Y. Or, hey, that won't work with this because the versions misalign. And it won't allow you to enter those broken stages, again, bringing that safety to what we choose. But at the same point, and very importantly, many different solutions that exist out there give me a Prometheus package to install. But that Prometheus is their Prometheus package. And they expose 2 or 3 values. And, right, they make it really, really simple. On the other hand, what's been done here in these packs, which I love, is in the end, it's a wrapper around a Helm chart. And that is extremely powerful because that Helm chart is the Kube Prometheus stack in this case, let's say. And the Kube Prometheus stack is the de facto standard upstream open source that is used for Prometheus. You want to make any changes to the Helm values, there are different defaults set there that are the defaults that are recommended by the platform. But you want to make any change you want, you have access to the full value. So you get the simplicity of a out-of-the-box working solution, but you have the full flexibility that you got in the open source world. And it goes beyond that because GitOps, something that we've been talking about a lot, Pedro, right? In the GitOps world, you have the unfortunate people that have reached the incorrect realization that Argo CD in their mind is a good GitOps tool. I am from the Flux CD side of the world, so yeah.
That's fine.
But there's Flux CD, there's Argo CD, there's Rancher Fleet, there's Carvel Cap Controller, there's a dime a dozen of these tools.
Yeah.
But the 2 main ones are Argo and Flux. Well, Spectro Cloud offers both of them as packs to me. I could install either one if I want them. It's not going to be too opinionated because the idea is to give us the options. It's that optionality of saying, we want to give you the option to decide what you want to use because we won't be opinionated, so you can be opinionated is one of the lines that I heard from Ant a few times. And I completely agree with that, right? That is the mode here. But obviously that only extends to a certain level. And that's where the value is that we can also just add any Helm chart into a profile. Add your Helm repository to the system and add any Helm chart. Add any YAML manifest as well. So it's not only tied to these verified pieces of software. We obviously have the benefits when using them that A, they're verified, and B, they have these validations in them. But you want to add your own Helm charts, you want to add your own manifests? Awesome. Go right ahead and you get that same simple lifecycle management capability.
Yeah, and you can build all the versions around it, as you said, version control it. At the end of the day, all of it is GitOps, and we were talking about this earlier, right? So we follow, you have GitOps with Argo and registries. Here you have GitOps, you have this full stack declarative state, which is still the single source of truth, which just doesn't live in Git, but it lives in Palette. And then you have the registries where you're pulling, or the OCI artifacts where you're pulling things from. So at the end of the day,
if you use Crossplane, it is sitting in Git, because Crossplane gets synced down to the management cluster using Flux, and then it goes up to Palette, and then from Palette it goes down to the cluster. So it's double. But it is amazing. Palette is the only tool I have seen. Spectro Cloud Palette is the only tool I have seen of a fleet manager that actually answers every single line of or demand of the Open GitOps initiative of GitOps standards. It is a pull-based mechanism. It is declarative configuration stored remotely that gets pulled down with consistent reconciliation. Everything that we need for GitOps, this is GitOps. Very funny that one of the demands of GitOps is not Git, but GitOps is a term and does not demand Git. This is GitOps.
Yeah. Exactly.
I'm gonna jump in here, guys. In the interest of time, I think we need to move on.
Before you do, you almost got out of it. But Scott, we need to talk about this Ollie situation, this O11i.
God damn it.
By the way,
I would love to know.
Exactly. I want everyone to answer, please, in the questions. I don't care where. Does anyone except for Ant understand what Ali is? Excuse me, Ollie. Does anyone know what that is?
Thanks for aping my accent. I feel persecuted.
I still read it as.
Does anyone know what that is?
Yeah, I still read it as O11i. So that's it.
Well,
that's me.
You guys clearly just aren't around in the CNCF landscape like I am.
Apparently, it means observability. But anyway, we move.
Yeah, there we go.
Exactly.
Okay. So I promise checks in the post, Scott, for doing such a sterling job of selling Palette. I think to take it back to the sort of enterprise requirements, there's a clear statement here that you have to think about the full stack when you are automating. It is more than just the core elements of Kubernetes, and we're in this CNCF landscape with so many different options that fit the needs of your different environments and your business, like even just the couple of companies that we've been talking about here. So having that choice, but then also being able to manage the risk that comes with choice. And that's a key requirement. If you're going into managing 20 plus 50 plus clusters without a full stack view and without that choice and management of risk, then you are opening yourself up to cost and consistency issues, all the stuff we spoke about earlier.
Yeah. And if we have people that are listening, they're literally just starting on their journey. I mean, some of this might not even make sense because the pain is not there yet, but it will be. So hopefully we can give you a bit of an insight on what's coming, because just a lot of the things that Scott mentioned comes with, as you mature into this multi-cloud, multi-version, multi-era Kubernetes, either if you're using Terraform, Crossplane, Palette, etc.
Yeah. So you guys beat me up about the word Ollie. So we got observability here on the slide.
Thank you.
Tell me why this is so important in real world enterprise Kubernetes.
The bullying worked. No, I think I'll just start. I think on the observability side, we started in the beginning, and Scott already mentioned, and to be fair, Prometheus and Grafana, they still the de facto standard when it comes to the monitoring and to the stack, right? Any monitoring stack will have Prometheus as part of that. It will have Grafana dashboards. That's not changing. But what we're seeing is that as it evolves in the past 12, 18 months, we're seeing a lot of the open telemetry coming into play, open observe. We're seeing a lot of these tools also having all of these collectors, so you can bring it all into the same stack. And I think from our perspective, from the Spectro Cloud Palette side, that's where our flexibility also comes in, because we've started, and we're obviously still supporting all the Prometheus and Grafana as a monitoring stack, and we have dashboards and all those things that customers can easily consume. But then we also now very quickly also introducing the OpenTelemetry and OpenObserve, and we've started bringing these stacks with this as well, also with the help of Scott and some of the work that we've been doing with some of the customers that need this at scale. They want to monitor it with OpenTelemetry as well, because they're using other products that are already within the OpenTelemetry standards, and they want to consume, and they have those collectors as well. So we're seeing a big shift, but most importantly, the observability comes in, as Ant, you were saying just earlier, to minimize risk for sure, right? Because you need observability to know what's going on, what's happening. So it cannot be an afterthought. And we are seeing that there's a lot of other things starting to plug into the observability space. And we'll talk about that a little bit. For example, the auto-scaling piece, right? And I think, Scott, we had a big discussion before around things like if you're using HPA or VPA or whatever other auto-scaling mechanism, cluster autoscaler, which we support through Cluster API and all these things. But they can only work if your observability is actually in place as well, and your metrics are actually in place. So building all of these observability stacks, it's very important, and we'll go.
You blew my mind. This Scott was having a discussion with Pedro and I this morning, and I've been thinking all day about what Scott said. You blew my mind with the idea.
Happens to me all the time.
You blew my mind with the idea that the more you use abstraction and dynamic rules like autoscaling is designed to do, you don't actually have a declared desired state there. You are devolving a degree of responsibility to a tool to do it for you. And like that is something I'd never really considered before, but it's kind of fundamental. It breaks the model.
Right. I think about the idea that in the end, what is a pod? A pod is also an abstraction, right? In the end, we're talking about a process running on Linux inside of a Linux namespace. And, right. So really, is runC also an abstraction? The answer is yes. Right. And then above that, I have container D. Above that, I have the
all the way
CRI
down.
interface, which goes into a pod. Right. But let's say even just at the Kubernetes level, if you're not putting a pod manifest itself into Git, is it actually declarative? Kind of, because a deployment, when it goes to the cluster, is creating a replica set, which is going and creating pods then, which are actually what I wanted to run. So as we get to these higher level of abstraction, the difference between actual and what I've declared grows, right? Just from a deployment to a pod, we already have 2 levels of abstraction. You go to something like Knative, that adds in another 2 levels or 3 levels, depending on your configuration. You add in Crossplane, that adds in additional levels. You add in Helm charts, that adds in additional ones. Auto scaling is not just horizontal, add more or less replicas. We're seeing amazing tools now like ScaleOps, for example, that do automatic changing of my resources in Kubernetes, right? Of the resource requests and limits, things like that. All of a sudden, my desired state is not 100% what exists. Or take it to the next level with agentic AI and all of that stuff. It's so difficult today to understand from declarative state what actually is running, that observability becomes so much more important, because otherwise I have no clue what's going on, because my desired state doesn't have how many I want anymore and doesn't say how much resources it's supposed to have. And in some cases, it may just be a natural language prompt saying, I want a container with Nginx and the files in this Git repo running at this URL. And agent does its voodoo magic, and boom, I have a deployment with, whatever, with an init container that syncs things down, and it goes and is exposed
and $1 million
to ingress.
and $1 million AWS bill at the end of it, which you didn't desire either.
Exactly, right? But so all of these things make it so observability is so much more critical. And yeah, Prometheus and Grafana was fine when observability equaled monitoring. But today, it means monitoring, logging, and tracing.